welcome To the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. I'm Carrie Stein, executive producer of the program, sitting in for Bonnie Bay. Today we have a treat. We're speaking with Kitt Shapiro, legendary, iconic Eartha Kitt's daughter. She recently wrote a book about her special mother-daughter relationship, and it's called Eartha and Kitt. Welcome, Kitt. Really nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us to discuss your book and to discuss your mom. Let's start off with, why'd you write the book?
You know, it's interesting, and I've thought about this now, obviously, in the recent past, because it seems to me that I am the way my mother's voice stays alive. And I'm not talking about the public persona of Eartha Kitt, because that will always live on with music and film and television in perpetuity. But I'm talking about the person who was of the earth. Eartha was her given name, and she truly was of the earth. And she was such a unique person and an incredibly grounded individual. And I think that I just felt, with all the noise that's going on in our world right now, that to really see who she was and to learn these lessons that she imparted to me and to the people that she came in contact with, I felt that the timing was just right.
Well, she has a story, an interesting, backstory just about her life that I don't think most people know. And certainly anyone I've mentioned that we were going to do this interview said to me, I had no idea. So tell us about her upbringing and where she came from and how she became Eartha Kitt.
My mother was born in 1927 in a little town called North South Carolina. She was born on a cotton plantation. In fact, till the day she died, she said, I'm just a cotton picker from the South. That's how she saw herself. I think that's where she felt she was, that authenticity that she brought to the stage, to the characters that she played, I think people felt. When my mother was born in 1927, in those years, she was referred to as a yellow gal because she wasn't dark enough for the community that she lived in South Carolina. And her mother gave her away when she was very young, because her mother went to marry a black man who said that I won't have that yellow gal in my house. My mother's birth father, the identity, she never knew. She never knew who he was. It was assumed he was a white man because of the color of her skin. But we never found out his identity. So she started off, on this planet being treated by the community that she was born into. She was, not accepted by, and obviously by society, she wasn't accepted because she was a Black woman. So she kind of, always had this issue with this desire that people have of pigeonholing and categorizing, and the need to put us in categories and say you are a specific ethnic group, you're a specific race, you're a specific religion, you're a specific gender, whatever it is that we feel as society that we have to conform another person to. She felt she never understood why that was so important. It keeps us separate, she felt. It keeps us from accepting each other as long as we keep each other in separate boxes. And she also didn't understand that you can mistreat a little, as she referred to herself as urchin, because of the color of their skin, which they have no control, nobody has the control over that. Then that treatment that humans, pay to each other was incomprehensible to her. She didn't understand that. So what I find so interesting, and why I wrote the book, and the book is called A Daughter's Love Story in Black and White. And the reason that we titled it that way was because obviously my mother and I looked very different. My skin tone, my hair, I clearly don't have her same skin tone in her hair. That being said, I am her biological child, but yet here I am in the year 2021, and I get people on social media literally saying to me, your mother clearly lied to you. You can't possibly be her biological child. You were obviously adopted. And I think back to how I was brought up, and it's so unfortunate that because people don't look like another person thinks they should look or should behave or should be, we want to deny their existence. You know, it's like, I can't be her daughter because you don't think I look like I should look. When I say I have no control over genetics, and I actually do look a lot like my mother. If you could get past the fact that our skin tone is different, I do look incredibly like my mother. So I just think it's a great way to keep these conversations. The more that we keep talking about this silliness of treating each other differently because of the way we look, I think we just need to keep those voices alive.
And she called you, she said you were like the United Nations. She loved the fact that you couldn't really put the two of you in boxes, because she was also part Cherokee.
Yes, she was mixed. She was part Cherokee, African-American, and most likely, as I said earlier, her father was probably a white man. And she would say to me, you were like a walking United Nations. You either break every rule or you fill every quota. And she loved that. She loved that you couldn't really identify exactly what my ethnic background was, that she felt was how you stop this whole stereotyping of individuals, and how we get past that. I think that everybody should have to take a DNA test, and we should all see from the day that we're born, we should all learn that how mixed we all are, and let's just overcome that one piece and get on to other things. There's so many other things in this world we can argue about.
Well, and in many ways, because your mother had already become a star,
right,
by the time that you were born.
Yes. Yes.
So and you had some interesting experiences because of that, when others were not going to South Africa.
Right.
You went. Talk about that.
Right. So, it's interesting because people ask me, how did you identify? What race did you identify? My mother never allowed. She brought me up to that we were part of a human race. We weren't part of a specific, ethnic race. We were all in this together on this planet, and we should be able to live in harmony and accept each other and have empathy for each other. In 1974, 73 and 74, my mother decided to perform in South Africa. That was during apartheid. It was not a popular choice on her part because a lot of artists were boycotting South Africa. My mother felt that artists, though, were the true, had the ability to break barriers because they didn't have to abide by diplomatic rules. So they could go and affect change. So when she took on the engagement, she insisted that she perform for mixed race audiences. And we were also raising money to build schools for African children. Now, that being said, my mother went there. She had VIP status. She was, not bound by the rules of apartheid. So she was allowed to go to places that were technically, quote unquote, whites only facilities. But what was very interesting, and I had grown up and traveled the world already in my life, but I never thought of my mother and I being different. She was my mother. We'd similar, birthmarks. I mean, as a little girl, you want to point out the similarities that you have with your mother. But when we were in South Africa, there was one particular situation where I had gone to an amusement park with a tutor that I had traveled with, and had loved this amusement park, and I wanted my mother to come to enjoy it. And one day she did, that she was off from work, and a gentleman who worked there came up to her and said to my mother, "Excuse me, are you European?" And she said, "No, I'm American." And he said, "No, I mean, are you colored?" And she looked at her skin and she said, "I guess if you call this colored, then yes, I'm colored." And he said, "Well, I'm afraid this is a whites only park, so you're going to have to leave." So my mother stood up and she took my hand and she went to leave the park very calmly. And I, as a young girl, saying to her, "Tell him who you are, tell him that you're allowed to be here. You're a VIP, you're a celebrity, on and on." And she said to me, don't panic. God may not be there when you want him, but he's always on time. And a few days later, my mother was doing a press conference and they wanted a photograph, and the amusement park happened to be in the background. And she said, oh, you know, it's so funny. I was thrown out of that amusement park the other day. And of course, the press took pictures and they were, you know, made a big deal. And the owner of the park was, you know, upset and embarrassed and contacted my mother and said, how can I make it up to you? And she said to him, well, we are raising money to build these schools, so a donation would be most, you know, appreciated. And my daughter would really like to come with her friends. So he sent us tickets. We went back to the amusement park, and my mother brought a bunch of kids who were all mixed races, different ethnic backgrounds. See, that to me is the person that she was. My mother understood that there is a way to affect change without necessarily making a scene in the moment, which is what I would have done. You know, as a celebrity, if I had been, I would have made a big scene and said, you know, I'm allowed to be here and you don't know what you're talking about. But my mother knew somehow there would be presented a situation that would have more impact. Or maybe she didn't know that, but she thought there might be. And that, to me, are these stories that I parlay in this book are what's really important, because they show the strength of this woman who never compromised herself for anybody else, who followed her gut and her heart, and the incredible strength that took as a human being and a woman, a mother, a single mother at that, to live her life truly that way, I think is pretty impressive.
And the two of you you were very close. You traveled with her all the time. But, you know, the whole idea of having celebrities being politically active, it's very controversial. There are those who like it. There are those who don't, obviously, who are against that. You know, you go, just go sing, just go do your craft. Don't, you know, you have nothing to do with the rest of the world. But she really took that seriously, and it hurt her. There was a point that it actually impacted her career during the Vietnam War.
You know, it's funny you say that, because she took it seriously, but she took it seriously not because she was a celebrity. She took it seriously because she felt she lived in a country where she had a right to speak her mind. And if asked her opinion, that somebody actually wanted to hear what she had to say. So she thought of it as a very, you know, simplistic situation. She happened to have been a famous person. She was invited to the White House when Lady Bird and President Johnson was in power, and Lady Bird Johnson had a luncheon. And my mother was asked her opinion on the juvenile delinquency in the streets of America at the time. And she stood up and she felt that it had something to do with our involvement in Vietnam, and that the young men didn't agree, the young people in this country didn't agree with our involvement in Vietnam. Now, she didn't understand why such a huge deal was made after the fact. She says, in the moment, there wasn't any press in the luncheon, in the dining hall, and there wasn't a big, you know, there wasn't a big gasp that she had said something that, you know, was that surprising. It was after the fact, and it was, I guess, President Johnson himself who didn't like what she said and took it very personally, I guess understandably so. And yes, he single-handedly gave the order to find whatever you can find on that woman. There was a CIA dossier on my mother, which we found. Seymour Hersh called my mother when Watergate broke and told her that there was a dossier on her. The FBI had been sent to investigate to see if she was communist or anti-American. And, you know, this was years later after that happened, but during that time, she was basically put out of work in the United States because of that.
That's what a story. Here was this young woman who had everything going against her. She grew up so poor. You know, you tell the story of her going up to New York and everything she's wearing, you know, that's all she has. How she made that transition to fame and to using what she had, to using her talents.
Right.
What was that like for her?
I think that she understood that you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, right? That it's as simple as that. Every day you wake up. She was very able of understanding the importance. Every day she would say, thank you for my eyesight, my hearing, the basic things that we are blessed with as human beings, if we're lucky enough to have our health and we open our eyes every day. She would give thanks every day. And then she understood that humans have this ability to better themselves. And we should, if we can take advantage of that and the opportunities, the doors that may or may not open, that she was able to do that, which I think that it was basically her instinct, her survival instinct. She was a fighter, she was a survivor, and she understood that if a door opens a little bit, you just keep moving forward and you just go and you just keep going. And when she was presented with an opportunity in New York City to audition for a dance company, the Katherine Dunham Dance Group, which she took on a dare. A friend of hers dared her to go on audition. She took the dare. And she grew up, when she came up from the South to an aunt who brought her up from the South because of she was being so mistreated that this aunt had been alerted that she needed to get this little girl out of the South. And people were gonna kill her just from the abuse that she withstood. The aunt who lived in Spanish Harlem, my mother would talk about the sounds of the city, the sounds of music in the streets and people movement, and even the sounds of the subways and the trains and just the basic rhythm of life, that she sort of knew to move with that. So when she went to audition for this dance troupe, she just followed the teacher and she had this natural ability. And that won her a scholarship to the school of Katherine Dunham Dance School. And then she ended up joining the ballet company later. And that's how she ended up leaving New York and traveling the world, started her travels around the world with that dance company.
You had quite a unique relationship with your mother.
Right.
And what was it like for you to be first the daughter of this famous woman and always with her because you traveled with her, and then her manager? And how did you even make that transition?
Well, as an only child, and I had carrying her name, she would often introduce us and she would say, I'm Eartha and this is Kitt, as if I completed her somehow. And I do think in many ways I did. I think I gave her this foundation that she yearned for, this family that she yearned for, this levelness that she wanted, that, when you have an upbringing and you've had a difficult time as a young child, you carry that discomfort with you a lot. And I think she yearned for stability, and I gave her that, giving birth to me, having my parents divorced when I was very young, but I was really her strength. And I felt, even as a little girl, somehow instinctively, I knew that I was supposed to be her daughter. I used to say to her, God put me here so that I would be you would be my mommy and I would be your daughter. And I think that our entire lives together, I sort of was really good at being that person to her, being that her, I don't want to say second banana because I was the center of her life. And she was completely and totally devoted to me. And anybody who spoke to her about or heard her speak about me would understand that. She was a mother first and foremost. So I do think that we had that unique connection, that it was supposed to be that way. And we were blessed to have had it. We also both knew that during our lives together. This is not something I came to after she left or the last few years of her life. We both lived our lives like that. Now, that being said, we had a very typical mother-daughter relationship. This was not for, there were some rocky times in our lives. I rolled my eyes like a typical teenager, driving down the street, and she'd be doing facial exercises in the car and I'd be mortified, would hope the door would just open and she'd just roll out, or, and she would tell me to do something and, and I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, we were mother-daughter, but yet that you know, I mean, that's just life. That's just what it is. You know, you take all of those sides of human beings, and we were very lucky to know that we had this incredible connection, and that was truly a blessing.
Were you able to have any sort of typical like childhood friendships? And because if you were traveling a lot, I know there was one point where she didn't want to travel anymore. She, right?
I didn't want to travel anymore. Right. I mean, but she was still traveling because that's how she made her living. Right. She had, especially when there wasn't much work here in the United States after the White House incident, you know, she toured the world. Luckily, she had an international fan base. And so we traveled a lot, and she felt it was really important as a parent to have me with her. As a teenager, I didn't want to be, you know, dragged off to another country. I wanted to stay home with my friends. So there's a lot of guilt sometimes that goes along with being, you know, a child. It's not about being a child of a famous person. It's about being an only child of a single mother, I think, for many reasons. And how it evolved that I became, you know, working for her. Well, you know, that's the nepotism does have a perk. So, you know, it's, yeah, she didn't have a trust of agents and managers and lawyers. And so she said, I was pregnant with my son, who's now 30. And, you know, she said, you know what, you should just work for me. You know, we should be sticking together. It's all going to be yours one day anyway. So you might as well, you know, take it from me now. So that's how it was really her idea. It wasn't really an expertise that I had any interest in or wanted to go into, but, you know, it worked for both of us very well. And for my family, you know, it was a blessing.
So what sort of wisdom can you offer both as your mother, from you as a mother, and from you as a daughter?
So I really think one of the best things my mother taught me was to have a sense of humor and to not take myself too seriously, not take life too seriously, because there's so many bumps in the road. And certainly what we have experienced this past year as a world, we have seen bumps like we never thought we would ever experience. I think my mother was really good at knowing and showing that you just kind of go with the flow. You just follow the river as it winds, and you hold on tight, and you just keep moving forward.
Were there any parts that she played, anything that really were like your favorites?
I mean, I loved her Disney roles. You know, I thought that her voiceovers, and she did a lot of them as she got older. She won Emmys for the voice of Yzma in The Emperor's New School, the television series, but she also voiced the role in the animated film, The Emperor's New Groove. And Sting did the music for The Emperor's New Groove. And so that to me was, because I was already an adult, I had children already. And, you know, there was one day where we were sitting in Sting's apartment, and, you know, he and my mother were rehearsing, you know, and I'm looking out the window and I'm just thinking, okay, this is pretty good. Like, you know, here I am listening to my mother and Sting. I mean, that's kind of a cool thing. And then a few days later, we got to have lunch with Colin Powell. So these are not roles that she did, but they were opportunities in my life that I got to meet people that were incredible human beings and have, you know, had affected change. And, you know, many of them were in awe of my mother, who, you know, was just a mother to me, but, you know, to them, she was a trailblazer and an icon. And there I was, sort of along for the ride, and very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you missed Orson Welles, and you missed James Dean.
I did. I heard the stories of James Dean. My mother and James Dean were very close friends. People asked me, were they romantically involved? People asked me if my mother and Orson Welles were romantically involved. I don't know. She says not. I wasn't there. I can't attest to it. I don't know. She claims there was never any romance between either of them. But she felt very, very, as she would have said, simpatico with James Dean. She called him Jamie. And, you know, she talked about these incredible people that Orson Welles, and they would sit in cafes in Paris, and she would listen to their conversations that he had with artists and writers. And and other, intellectuals. And my mother would just yearn to learn more. And so the next day she would run to the library, and do research on names that she'd heard. And so she studied. She never finished high school, but she studied on her own, and she would read about philosophers and religions and different, histories, because she felt that the more that you could teach yourself, the more nourishment, whether it be from foods or knowledge that you gave your body, the richer you became as a human being.
Thank you so much, Kitt. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with the book, and keep on doing the good work.
Thank you. I really do appreciate all of your kindness.
That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, join us next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more. PBS.